But Mr. Edgar, I don't have any use for a serving tray. I don't serve tea to guests. Okay, well then how about we turn it over and add legs and turn it into a laptop tray for if you're doing work in bed or breakfast in bed. Which means we need a new piece of paper. All right, so I use my wife's laptop as a good basic idea of how big. So we're gonna want 12 by 18 as our basic platform measurement. But what that means is that our rails are gonna need to be a little bit bigger. And because we're using 3/4 inch stock, this guy is gonna have to be increased by 1.5 times the thickness of our stock. And this guy's gonna have to be increased by the thickness of the stock. So our rails are gonna need to be 13.5 by 18 3/4. In the middle, we're gonna cut a notch in the bottom to curve our fingers around to lift it up so we can get the feet out. Groove for our base to be, say, 3/8 of an inch from what's going to become the top instead of 1/4 of an inch. Still going to be rabbeting at 3/4 of an inch on the ends because that's how thick the stock is for the sides. Also, the piece that I grabbed off the wood pile has some significant wane, so we're only going to get about 2.5 inch out of this guy, but that's okay because we have 3/8 of an inch plus 3/16 will still leave us enough here to hide our legs if they're about an inch in thickness when we get to that part. So for this first part of cutting the ends and the sides, that'll be the same process as what we started with for the serving tray. And it's only after we have it mostly together are we gonna take a hard left turn and start doing different things like cutting this notch here instead of a hole. So to start out, let's cut the total length, which is gonna be this guy plus a little bit extra for saw curve. And what if the end is split? What if the end is not perfectly square? So 18 3/4 plus 13.5 plus some margin of error, let's call it another half. So that's basically 14 plus 18 is 32 3/4. So we're going to start by cutting off 32 3/4 inches of our stock and then cutting it down from there. This end isn't split, but it still does need to be squared up. Only rabbet the short pieces. Now that we've cut out our rails, we're going to want to take a look at cutting out our base. We're going to want a base that's not exactly these dimensions. We're going to want a base that will nestle inside the grooves that we cut. So we're going to want it to be as long as the long piece, because the long piece is going to sit inside these rabbets of our end pieces. So the length of our long piece, that is going to be the length of our base. But for the width, we only want to go halfway into this guy, because that's how deep the groove is, and halfway into that guy. So we want it to be the length of the side pieces minus a total of 3/4 of an inch. So that means that we're going to want our total piece to be 12 3/4 by 18 3/4. All the major cuts done on our frame, and now we can put it together. Dry fit is very important because it allows us to see any adjustments that we need to make before we glue it up, so that we can have nice tight joints. And what we're seeing here is, and we're looking at the underside, or what's going to become the underside, significant gappage here, and this is due to two reasons. One, this wood is warped. Now that can be ironed out when we glue and nail and clamp this thing. The warping is not so bad that we're going to have to chuck it and start over. We can work with this. However, some of these gaps are because this guy needs to be cut down just a little bit in order to allow for a tighter fit around the outside. So we're going to have to take this apart and just shave this guy down un poquito in order to get ourselves good fits. Adjustment cuts on the tray top complete. Now dry fit says that we have nice tight joints, and we can start working on the legs.